This is text problem 14-2, and we're given some information about a country over several years. We're given their federal budget receipts, their federal budget spending, their GDP, and we're asked to find their deficit as a percent of GDP. First of all, we need to understand what deficit means. This is a word we hear a lot in the U.S. in our news and in our society. Because what it means is the difference between the amount of money the federal government brings in and the amount of the money that the federal government spends. So to find the deficit for any country, you would take their spending and subtract their receipts or their income. So you can think about this from an individual perspective of your family. You may have a deficit if you spend more than you make. Or from the national perspective, what the federal government spends versus what they receive or make. So in this case, we're given spending and we're given receipts. So we can find the deficit by just subtracting spending minus receipts. And we'll know the deficit for the country, how much they're spending more than they're receiving. And then we're just asked to find that deficit as a percent of the GDP. So we'll just use our normal formula for finding something as a percent of something else. And I'm going to, as I like to do, use Excel to help me do this math. Of course, you can do it on paper with a pencil or pen, but I like to ask Excel to do it because Excel will do it more quickly. I can just put the formula in once and Excel will do it for all my rows. So as you see, I've copied into Excel the information that we're given in the problem. And the next thing I'm going to do in Excel is create a column for my deficit, because I want to find the deficit before I'm able to find what the deficit is as a percent of GDP. So remember, deficit is just we'll write down here our definition of deficit. So our deficit is our spending minus our receipts. All right, so how much does the government spend minus how much they received? And that's the deficit, the difference between those. Or you can think about it as how much more they're going into debt every year. That difference between what they spend and what they bring in. So for deficit, I'm just going to ask Excel to do this calculation. I'm going to say, okay, I want my spending, which is this guy, in cell C2, minus my receipts for the year of 2015. And Excel tells me my deficit for that year is 352.8. And I'll just have it fill in all the way down the table. So now I have my deficit for each year. I have my spending minus my receipts for each year. And the last thing we have to do is just find what that is as a percent of GDP. And anytime you want to find X as a percent of Y, you use this formula. You'll take X divided by Y, and then you can multiply that by 100 to get it into a nice percent form. So deficit as a percent of GDP, which is what we finally want, is just going to be my deficit divided by my GDP, and then that whole thing multiplied by 100. And then I have my percent of GDP. So I can go back and fill that into the table here. It says to round to 1 decimal place. So the first one is 2.42, so I'm going to put in 2.4. And the second one is 2.28, so I'm going to put in 2.3. The third one is 2.14, so I'll put in 2.1. And the last one, 2018, is 2.0, so I'll just put in a 2.0 here. And check our answer, and we're good. If you have any more questions, feel free to stop by office hours or shoot me an email.